Hey there, and welcome to the She Calls Her Shots podcast. Every week, we chat through different business building topics that'll help you gain clarity around your goals, find inspiration in your journey, and also help you create a life and a business that you love. My name is Krista, and I'm a wedding and brand photographer and your go-to no-fluff business coach. In these episodes, we talk through both the tactical strategies, habits, and the mindset work that'll help you take those really big leaps. And we always focus on the real talk and the behind the scenes of what it takes to create a sustainable and a thriving business. Because let's be honest, the work isn't always glamorous, but it's always worth it. So girlfriend, let's make some moves and start calling our own shots. Hello, friend, and welcome back to the She Calls Her Shots podcast. As I am recording this, as we are releasing this, we are a few days into the new year. And so I hope that wherever this finds you, I hope that you are in a space where you can give yourself grace and give yourself some love and just trust that the moment that you are in right now is right where you need to be. And so first of all, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for being here. I am always so honored. I know how busy we are. Entrepreneurs, we're small business owners. We wear all the hats, and I know what that means. I know how busy we are. And so I just want you to know that I don't take it lightly that you are spending time with me today. And today we are going to talk about goal setting and routines and habits that we can implement for big picture growth. And I'm really fired up about this topic because this tends to be a really highly requested one, or something that is put on a pedestal or has a lot of importance with my one-on-one clients. Because truthfully, right, like we have to build sustainable routines and habits to get us to the place that we want to go to. Because we could hustle, we could work really hard, we could put in all of the time and energy and effort, but if it's not sustainable, we're likely not going to see the end results that we want. And so we're going to really dive into that today and kind of dissect it. And it might be a little bit different than what you're thinking. I'll preface it with that, but I'm excited to have this conversation with you. And if this is something that resonates with you, I would love for you to connect with me on Instagram. It's at Hey Krista Marie, and I would love to just hear what has felt important to you. What are some habits that you have started implementing? And again, if you listen to my habit episode a few episodes ago, right, it can just be one habit that starts the shift of who you want to be. And so I'd love to hear what habits have felt important to you, how you've started to feel the shift into who you want to become, or just simply even if this idea resonates with you, right? Maybe you're not there yet. Maybe you're working towards it, but you know that this is something that you're prioritizing and that's important for you as you're listening. So I would love to connect with you. If you have been a longtime listener, thank you so much for being here. If you have left a review for the podcast, I just want you to know how much I appreciate it. If you haven't left a review, if you can take 2 minutes to leave one on Apple Podcasts, I would be so incredibly grateful. Every single review that we get helps to increase the visibility of the show and then helps other listeners also come across the podcast. So whether it's leaving a review or maybe even sharing a screenshot on your Instagram, however you can help to get the word out there, I would so appreciate it. But let's go ahead and dive into the topic for today. And first and foremost, if you haven't listened to my last solo episode, it came out just a few episodes ago, I would highly recommend listening into that because we kind of dive into the things that we need to do before we start thinking about setting goals and some of the things that we want to start thinking about, the shifts that we want to make. If you haven't listened to it, that's okay. You can always listen to this and then listen to it after. But I definitely recommend listening into that one at some point because I think for some of us, when we think about goal setting, again, we're motivated, right? We've got big goals. We have visions. We have dreams for ourselves and our business. And so we kind of just want to dive right in, right? Like go full force, plan out all the goals, make the best goals possible, right? But there's oftentimes this inner clarity and this inner shift that has to happen before we can really dive into that. And so making sure that you're prioritizing, have I made the mental shifts that I need to make in order to open myself up to be able to set goals that are aligned, right? Because how often have we set goals because they sound really good or they sound really impressive, or we see other people setting these goals in their business. So we set the same goal because we think that that'll make us look, legitimate, or like make people want to work with us, right? Like, how often have we fallen into that trap? So it's so, so important to make sure that the things and the goals that we're setting are actually aligned with who we want to be as people. But all of that said, let's go ahead and dive into some of the things that you'll want to start thinking about as you are thinking about goal setting. And first and foremost, and this might sound a little backwards or unrelated, but hear me out on this. First and foremost, I want you to understand how grounding habits, things like going for a walk, doing yoga, unplugging from your phone, how those grounding habits will help you be more creative in your business. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, Krista, this is a goal setting episode. Are we really starting off with the first tip being to take a break from your business? And the answer is yes. And I say this because sometimes we get so hyped up into the energy of productivity that we set goals from this place of hustle and not from a place of alignment. So how often, I'm like raising my hand right now because so many times I have been in the shower or on a walk or driving or some other random thing outside of my business where I get the most creative insights for my business, for growth, for content topics, for ways that I can connect and engage with people more authentically. A lot of the time, those perspectives happen when I am not working. So it's really interesting to me that for a really long time in my business, when I thought about creating content or when I thought about like working to create goals or create some sort of schedule or plan, so often I would sit at my desk and I would try to map everything out. But what I found was that was not the time that I felt the most creative. When I really tried to zero in and focus in and like get creative on what goals do I want to achieve, a lot of times those goals came from this place of hustle and not from a place where I felt grounded and really present with myself. And so I know you're probably like, this still isn't clicking. The thing that I want you to take away from this first tip is making sure that when you're setting goals that maybe you do sit down, maybe you're like, Krista, I do need to sit down and write them. That is totally fine. But my encouragement for you is to then give yourself some space. Walk away from that piece of paper, go for a walk, do some yoga, play with your dog, take a shower, get some rest, right? Like give yourself space to let those goals kind of marinate in your thoughts and let it kind of sit with you for a little bit. And because often when you give yourself that space, you give yourself that time to be able to sit with those thoughts, your brain and your thoughts will tell you if something needs to shift. So that's the first thing that I want to have. I don't even want to say that I want to give you permission because you already have this permission, but grant yourself the permission to be able to write the goals, set the goals, and then sit with them a little bit. Give yourself space, unplug, walk away, and then see how they feel, and then come back to them and tweak them or change them or do what you need to do. But that's the first thing that I want to make super, super clear is that just because you write it down on paper does not mean it has to be this way. And then the other thing is really when you're thinking about your goals and you're thinking about goal setting is starting to get really intentional about eliminating the task or the things that aren't tied to your bigger vision, or at least minimizing how much time you're spending on them. And so this really is, the whole idea of this is really just learning how to prioritize. And I say this because, so last year, I don't know about you, I have purchased, I think I've talked about this in a previous episode. There have been years where I have purchased like 3 different planners. because in my head, the planner that I had wasn't working. And so I kept buying all these planners, trying to find the planner that worked. And I eventually ended up using a Trello board. So digital on the computer Trello board, which was great because nothing was set in stone. I could, put down my ideas of what I wanted to do. I could archive them. I could move them around. I could shift them. And I really liked having the ability to have it be fluid. The problem was that my goals and the things that I needed to spend time on my business just kept growing, right? Now that it was digital, I could just add all of these tasks, all of these project ideas, all of these things I needed to do onto this digital board. And it became so overwhelming that then when I would look at it to sit down and do business, when I would sit down to do work on my business, I would feel so overwhelmed that I would waste a lot of time trying to figure out how to prioritize. And because that list kept growing and growing, I found myself spending more time on things that weren't actually moving the needle forward in my business, right? All of these ideas, all of these to-dos, all of these things just kept adding to my list. And I had lost sight of the bigger picture of where I wanted to grow and the activities that would actually help me get there. So as you are goal setting, I think it's really important to map out your goals, right? And we talked about this in the last solo episode that I had, of figuring out your vision of who you want to be, right? Like, how do you want to spend your time? What are the services and offers you want to provide? Like, what do you want your days to look like? Figuring all of that out, while in tandem, figuring out, okay, knowing that, what are the goals that I have for my business, right? Like, maybe you want to speak on stage at a conference. Maybe you want to write a book. Maybe you want to get published in a certain website. Maybe you want to be featured on a certain website, right? Like, whatever it is that your goals are, mapping out, okay, this is where I want to go. I want to get featured, right? Having that be kind of the main big bubble. I've talked about brain mapping before. You have one big piece of paper. The middle goal, the middle bubble is your big goal, right? I want to get featured on this article. And then from there, branching out to the next level of smaller bubbles. Okay, what is the next steps that would come before that? Well, if I want to get featured on this big article, I probably need to get featured on smaller articles first, right? Like, there are probably other publications or things that you would want to submit to in order to kind of work up to that big goal. And then before that, the next level up, okay, well, how do I even get featured on these smaller publication? Maybe I need to be a guest on a podcast, or maybe I just need to start writing articles, right? Like, maybe that's the first thing that you need to do. But really just mapping out, where is it that I want to go? And then what are the different levels of things that I can expect to do in order to work towards that goal? And the reason I say to do that in tandem with that vision exercise of who you want to be and how you want to be in 5 years is because sometimes we will spend so much time and energy working towards that goal that along the way, on the journey, we kind of neglect the person that we want to be, and we start to get into that hustle mode, right? Like, well, I just need to accomplish this goal. So I'm just going to, put everything that I can into accomplishing this goal, and everything else falls to the wayside. So it's really kind of looking at both, right? Looking both at your goals, where you want to be, how you're going to get there, the steps that you need to take in order to accomplish it, and also kind of keeping another eye on, okay, am I being the person that I want to be along the way, and kind of marrying those two things. Because at the end of the day, the journey is the thing that matters, right? How many times, maybe you haven't felt this, I've felt this many times in my business, but sometimes we will get so caught and set on this goal, this one thing that we want to accomplish. And then we get there and we realize, you know what, this actually isn't as satisfying as I thought it was going to be, right? Maybe it's a money goal. Maybe it's an experience that you wanted to have. Maybe it's a title that you wanted to earn. Sometimes we get so caught up in chasing whatever that goal is that we forget that we neglected who we wanted to be along the way. And not only that, but when we got to that end goal, that end result, we kind of felt a little disappointed. And so remembering that the journey is really the thing that matters. And so mapping out your goals, getting really clear on the steps that you need to take while also honoring who you want to be. Because one of my mentors says this, but she says the results are not guaranteed, but the journey sure as hell is. So getting really intentional about the process and really starting to get intentional about who you are along the way. Hey there, just interrupting briefly to mention that if you're really enjoying this episode, you'll probably also love being on my email list. Each week, I send out tips and resources and inspiration to make building your business feel more fun. We dive deeper into the podcast episodes, we share relatable and sometimes embarrassing stories about the real life behind the scenes of being a business owner. And I love to share tips and resources to help make the journey feel a little easier and a little bit more enjoyable. So head on over to KristaMarieLynch.com and enter in your info to join. I also want to talk about, so I have a whole episode on creative visualization, which I will link in the show notes. But at its core, what creative visualization is training your brain to start to visualize and feel what it will feel like to accomplish the goals that you want to accomplish. And there's a whole science behind it, right? There's this idea that the neural pathways in your brain, the ones that you strengthen, right, by practicing certain things over and over again, you start to strengthen muscles. It's the same thing as like going to the gym. The more muscles you work, the stronger they become. And so there's this science behind creative visualization where the things that you believe to be true, but not just like believe in your heart, but like you close your eyes, you visualize the person that you want to be. You can like imagine yourself accomplishing a goal. You can imagine yourself what it would feel like, right? To walk across the stage, to see your book published in the bookstore, to see yourself published or featured on this certain article. Like when you stop to really visualize that and think about it and embody that belief, the stronger that pathway becomes, and the more you start to see opportunities around you for things that can help you get there. So all of that to say, this idea of creative visualization is important because kind of along the lines of what we just talked about is that you have to know what you want, right? Like you have to know what your goals are. You have to know what you want. But more importantly, you have to know how you want to feel when you get there. Because like we just said, right, how many times have we gotten to a goal and realized it felt a little unfulfilling? And so one of the things that creative visualization can help you do along the way is, let's say, you have this big goal to be featured on an article. Like you submit an article, a blog post, whatever it is, or a session if you're a photographer, and you have this dream of being featured on a certain website. Closing your eyes and imagining yourself like seeing that article, seeing that session, seeing it be published, right? Where are you going to be when you get the call or the email that says that it's been accepted and it's going to be featured? How are you going to celebrate when you actually refresh the website and there it is, right? Like on the website, like getting really clear about what that would look like, but also understanding how you're going to feel in that moment. Because maybe you're going to feel a sense of pride and accomplishment, right? Like, I finally made it. This means I'm legitimate. This means that people will look at me and believe that I am, a professional and I'm so good and I have all of these talents. Like figuring out, what does this actually mean for me? So that along the way, you can start to reinforce those beliefs today. Because you don't want to wait until you accomplish that goal to feel like you're talented, right? Like you don't want to wait until you hit that one thing for this to be the acknowledgement that you are worthy. And how many times, right, have we set goals and either subconsciously or without realizing it, that goal is tied to a deeper part of us, right? Like if I can hit this money goal, if I can hit this, get this feature, if I can work with this certain client, it'll mean something about me, right? But I don't want you to wait. I don't want you to wait for that one goal. Again, that end result that is not guaranteed. I don't want you to wait for that to feel the way that you want to feel when it's accomplished. So how can you start to use creative visualization, right? Like see yourself accomplishing the goal, but also understanding, what does this mean about me? If I accomplish this goal, what are the feelings that are attached to it? And then knowing, okay, if the whole purpose of this goal is so that I feel worthy and like a true professional and someone who is valued, right? Or like whatever it is, how can you take those things and start feeling that today? What are some things that you can do in your business? And what are some mental mindset shifts that you can make to start feeling those right now? Because I don't want you to wait for that end result to give yourself the internal acknowledgement and internal acceptance that you deserve. And so I know this kind of took a little bit of a shift, but I truly think that this is so important. And I want to kind of end on that. I had one more thing that I wanted to talk about, and that was really just like finding a planning and a tracking process that works for you, right? And I will go on I'll give you a quick little story on what I found that's worked for me. But as far as like goal setting and planning, right? Like number one, again, understanding how these grounding habits and separating yourself from your goals can really be the thing that will make the goals, that'll create the goals that you are really chasing after, right? Like giving yourself space once you write down the goals, separating yourself, unplugging, letting it marinate and sitting with it and figuring out, are these goals coming from a place of hustle or are they coming from a place of alignment where I truly feel like these are the things that I want? And then using that creative visualization to understand, okay, these goals that I want, what is it that I really want? What's the feeling attached to them? How can I start to feel that today? And how can I strengthen the belief that these goals are feasible for me, right? Like creative visualization, that's the other part of it. Once you start to believe you're capable of doing these things, once you visualize yourself doing it, accomplishing it, seeing it, your brain naturally starts to believe that it's actually possible. And then again, like eliminating those tasks, right? Those things that aren't tied to your bigger vision, the things that sometimes we can end up spending too much time on. And that kind of gets me into that last final point I wanted to make of finding a planning and tracking process that works for you. So the thing that I found that worked for me after having a bunch of planners that, and then the digital planning and then feeling distracted, the way that I have written down my goals for 2023 that has been really great is that I have I'm a very visual person. So I have 3 different printed out like physical calendars that I can look at. So I have a year at a glance calendar. And really what that does for me, so it's literally just one sheet of paper with the months of the year written on it. And on that piece of paper, I wrote down kind of marketing at a glance. What is important for me to focus on this month, right? So for example, for photography, this is one of the things, right? I have broken it down into photography and coaching because those are the 2 big parts of my business. And so coaching, what are the things that I want to promote and talk about? And for photography, what's the thing that I want to promote and talk about this month? And what it does, number one, is it helps me get clarity so I don't feel like I need to talk about everything all at the same time, right? So let's say you're a photographer and you offer family sessions, branding sessions, event coverage, and weddings. Instead of feeling like every month you have to show up and talk about all of it, it gives you a little bit more clarity into, okay, what's the thing I want to promote this month that will be relevant for what I want to host next month. So maybe I want to promote mini sessions this month because I know next month I want to, like, those are the dates that people will be booking and those are the dates that I'll be hosting them. So it gives you clarity, right? At a glance. Here's my year. Here's the things I want to prep for. And here's what I want to have top of mind. So I have my year at a glance. Then I have a big tall on the wall calendar. You can get it at PaperSource. I love it. I'll link it below. But I have a tall on the wall calendar that really maps out each month by month. So right now I have the month of January up, and I have sticky notes throughout the month of, okay, what do I need to focus on this week? Or, well, this month, but I put the sticky notes on. So okay, here are 4 sticky notes on the first week of January of things that are important and relevant for me to think about this week. I don't tie them to a certain date, right? It's just 4 sticky notes kind of haphazardly spread throughout the first week, because this isn't my time to get into the nitty-gritty of my schedule, right? But I know, okay, in the first week of January, these are the things that are prioritized. I need to prioritize. And then I have my planner, which is a weekly planner. So I can see my week at a glance. I can write down all of my appointments, any calls that I have. Then I can look over at my calendar and say, okay, what is important to me this week, and where can I fit this in? What are the days where I actually have bandwidth to be able to do these things, right? And so figuring out a system that works for you. And for me, because I am so visual, I kind of needed to have it broken down into year at a glance, month at a glance, and then week by week. That was the thing that worked for me. And as convenient as the digital board was, the Trello board, I'm kind of phasing it out. Because I've realized that's a great space for me to brainstorm new project ideas, new things that I might want to implement. That's a great space for that. But as far as planning and really getting down into what do I want to grow and focus on, it just wasn't working for me. But maybe it'll work for you, right? So give yourself permission to try things out. See what feels good, and iterate on it, right? The digital board felt really good for me for a little while until it didn't. And then I switched it up and found something else that works instead. So all of that said, I hope that this was helpful. I know that goal setting and creating these routines and habits, it can be really difficult. And so just giving yourself space to try new things, to implement things and be okay with it maybe not working, right? Or maybe you need to tweak it a few times. Maybe you end up circling back to something that you tried in the beginning because maybe that actually was the thing that worked for you. Give yourself permission to explore. And all of that said, thank you so much for listening in today. I would love to hear your takeaways. Send me a message on Instagram at HeyKristaMarie. If we're not connected, I would love to connect with you there. I share very regularly with coaching, inspiration, podcast stuff. And that's the best place to connect with me. So thank you for being here, and I will see you over in the next episode. One last thing before you go, I'd absolutely love it if you left a review on Apple Podcasts. Or if you've already left a review, I'd love for you to share this episode with your business bestie. I love getting to shout out my listeners on the show, and the more listeners that we have, the more that I can help others create a thriving and sustainable business too. Thank you so much again for being a part of this community, and I can't wait to hear your takeaways from today's episode.